You're in a good place now. You are listening to Perspectives with Ashley Berges.
Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Berges. On today's show, we're going to be talking about purpose, leadership. You know, oftentimes I think a lot of us go through this life and we work for a corporation, we work for folks. There's certain things that we love. You know, maybe it's the camaraderie, maybe it's the paycheck, maybe it's the people that we work with. But sometimes we begin to question, is this where I need to be? Or even more so, what is my purpose? You know, life is about finding purpose and finding direction and finding your calling. Some people think purpose and calling are the same type of thing. I think it is. But I find that oftentimes, whether it was the paycheck that was important in the beginning or the security, oftentimes we step back and we start questioning our life. And I feel as though all of us have a unique purpose, and all of us can be a true leader, dynamic, understanding, and giving back. And so joining me on the show today is somebody that understands purpose inside and out, a bestseller, an author, multiple books, a speaker, and a coach on many levels that corporations and individuals seek out to really help them find their voice, to find their purpose, to organize their corporation in a certain way so that everybody succeeds. Joining me live on Live Your True Life Perspectives, Dov Barron. Dov just actually put out a book a few days ago, and he's going to be talking about that. So glad to have you on the show. How are you doing?
Excellent, Ashley. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve you and your audience.
So let's start with the most recent bit of information. You just put out a book a couple of days ago.
I did, yes. It's called Purpose's Missing Piece, and it's talking about putting purpose into the culture of your organization and why that matters so much, and how that is one of the great ways to create fierce loyalty inside of your organization.
So how do you begin to do that in an organization? How do you create that? How do you find that piece to ignite that purpose within the organization?
Well, when we go in and we work with a company, we always start with the leaders because they're the one. You know, leadership in so many ways is about impact, influence, and relationship. So you got to take care of those three things. But understanding that you're going to have that impact, you're going to have that influence, and you're going to generate those relationships based on what it is that's driving you. And until you know what your purpose is, we tend to be driven by unconscious things rather than conscious things. So this is a way to find out what really is, what's driving me, what's making me want to do the things that I want to do and have the impact that I want to have. And so that's the work we do. We help them to find out, and we always start with the leaders.
Well, they say, you know, the goodness either trickles down or other stuff because, you know, it all depends on, you know what I'm saying?
Poop moves downhill too.
It does. It does, and a whole organization can fall apart. You literally see it, and you're right. It either is an amazing thing or it permeates in a negative way when you have the leadership either not on point or maybe they're not really focusing on what needs to be focused on.
Exactly. Yeah, so we've got to find our own purpose as individuals, and then we've got to bring that to the organization. So you can't, you know, very often we'll go into an organization and say, you know, we want to find our purpose, and part of our work is, well, okay, we've got with you, what is your purpose? What is it that drives you? What is your unconscious drivers? What is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? What is it that you want to serve? And one of the places that most people make a big mistake around that is that they think that their passion and their purpose are the same thing. They're not. Your passion is merely the vehicle for your purpose. Passion is transitory, purpose is not. Purpose is deepening and evolving, but passion changes all the time.
That's interesting. I didn't even think about that. That's really powerful. Yeah. So let me ask you, what gets you out of bed every morning?
My purpose.
And what is
my
your
purpose? Yeah, so my purpose has an internal and an external, as do we all. So you have an internal purpose that is for you to communicate with yourself, and you have an external purpose, which is what you communicate with the world in the way that you'll serve. So my external purpose is to elicit and serve the purposes of others so that they can have the most impact and influence as leaders in order to create a better world.
And then from that, if you don't mind sharing, what is your internal purpose?
So the internal purpose is one of the things that when I work with my clients and organizations, I'll say your internal purpose should scare the crap out of you. If it doesn't scare you, it's probably not your purpose, because it should feel too big. It should feel like, oh my God, I'm going to seem like a bit of an egomaniac if I say this. But my internal purpose is to be a father to men.
That's powerful.
Now, when people go that, well, do you only serve men? No, absolutely not. I work a lot with many amazing women leaders. I'm a very, very big proponent of supporting women, and I started a hashtag called He for She, and I'm a great believer in women's empowerment, and I think that we need women as leaders. So people say, well, why are you a father to men? Well, there's two levels to that. One is it's mankind, it's not just man. But in the male form is what I've noticed is that the men who are attracted to work with me are guys who are very yang looking. So, you and I have met, Ashley, and anybody who's ever met me or has ever seen me knows that I would be one very ugly drag queen. There's nothing soft or feminine about my face.
Hilarious.
I can't. I kind of look like I've been punched in the face, or I might punch you in the face. Now, I'm not likely to do that, but I was a martial artist and I was a boxer, and I do have that kind of a face. And the guys that I attract, that I work with, are very often very yang. They look very masculine. I've been martial arts, bodybuilder, boxing. A lot of the guys, they look tough, they look big, they look powerful, but we're actually all heart and soul driven. But our culture or our circumstances made us repress that, and I bring that forward. So it's a balance of the yin and the yang, not only in men, but in women. So I love powerful women who are not trying to be men, powerful women who are just being powerful women. It's one of the reasons I love Oprah. Whether I agree with her philosophy on certain things or not is actually irrelevant. I love the fact that she's a powerful woman, not trying to compete by being a guy. And I see a lot of women leaders who are trying to be guys. You don't need to do that. You've already got enough power. The most powerful people in the world are women. Why? Because think about it. We think the world is run by white old men. It's not. How do I know? Because women have babies. Men can't exist without women. Women can exist without men. Women get to whisper in the ears of their sons and tell them how to be better men. Women get to whisper in the ears of their daughters and empower them or disempower them. Women are the most powerful force on the planet. And we need to embrace that, recognize that, and see the enormous value of that.
I agree with you, and I find it interesting what you were talking about earlier, about women trying to be like men. And, my mom grew up in a time where she felt that way. And I remember growing up around here, when I was like 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, and my mom always wore a suit, and, a suit with a long skirt. Mm-hmm. And her hair, she cut her hair. She had long hair. My mom was a Miss Runner-Up, Miss Runner-Up in the Miss Mississippi pageant for, I remember way before, I was ever conceived or thought about. But she cut her hair, made it short. And she did this to try to compete with the men. And it's very interesting. Yeah. And you see that with a lot of women that are around that age. And then you see that with women that have learned that from their moms or learned that from,
absolutely,
the environment. And it's interesting. And I agree with you. Women are women and should be and are a powerful force. But you're right. Women have the ability to lift up as well as cut down.
Women can change the world. We've just got to empower them to recognize. Don't try and change the world by competing with men, by trying to be men. You don't need to add to your power, women. You're already awesomely powerful, and we all need to learn from that. And what I want to say about that is, I am not a men's brain, woman's brain guy. You know from our previous conversations, but I have a massive background in psychology and neurosciences. And this idea that the men's brain is different than a woman's brain is both true and false. It's true that the way a man's brain operates is different than the way a woman's brain operates. But what's also true is epigenetics shows us that brain operates that way due to its environment. So if you bring up a man or a boy in the way that we bring up women, in the way that we bring up women to think, then a man's brain would become a woman's brain. The brain is plastic, it adapts. And so it's not about being more masculine or more feminine. It's about actually building that bridge across the brain and allowing us to embrace both sides. We think of women as being nurturing. Well, some of the most nurturing people I know are men. We think of men as being strategic. Well, some of the most strategic people I know are women. We have both inside of us. We have to balance the yin and the yang, but tap into the power of who we are at the same time without denying ourselves.
Yeah, environment and the way we were raised is so powerful. I was actually having a conversation with some women the other day about empowering women. And one of the things that I brought up was, we're trying to empower women, we're trying to work with that, but one of the biggest things that we got to get over, that hump, is our own negative self-talk. Now, whether, I know that mom and dad, for the most part, some folks were raised in some very toxic family dynamics, but for the most part, family did try to do the best they could. But I think that the way that a lot of girls are raised, they think that they're not as good, or they have to compete, or they have to do that. And it's about getting to that core belief system of lack and taking that out and scooping that out and adding and changing the fact that there is no lack, because I think that a lot of people act from that negative self-talk that they don't even realize really exists.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, everything around us. I mean, if you want to understand how the world works, it's very simple. We, particularly right now, we live in a world that is very clearly divisive. And so that is all about saying we're better than them or they're better than us. They have the advantage or we have the advantage. So it's all around somehow someone is not good enough, and you've got to somehow step up and compete with everybody else. Listen, I want everybody to get this. There is no competition. You are the only one in the world. You look and you go, yeah, but that's not true in my career, Dov, because, when Charlie's doing this and I'm doing that. No, he's not. Listen, I've been doing what I do for 34 years, speaking across the world, and I cannot tell you how much of my stuff has been nicked, how much of it has been stolen and used by somebody else. And it used to get me mental. It would have me livid, furious. But guess what I learned? About probably 10 years ago, I learned that I no longer give a crap. And the reason I don't give a crap is because I saw somebody on stage with my material speaking, and I went, oh, now I get it. It's not the idea that somebody plagiarizing your stuff is a compliment. It's not that at all. What it is very simple. They'll never be able to deliver my material my way because I am unique. Even if you take every word I said, you will never deliver it the way I deliver it. There is no competition in business and in life. Once you embrace your own unique being, who you are, it's not just the content, it's the context, and you are the context. Embrace that, and you suddenly have so much more power.
I agree with you, but nowadays too, with the social media impact, I feel like to some degree, when you haven't figured out who you are, that social media impact on competition and comparison is something that keeps a lot of people, I don't know, like stressed out, anxious, upset, sad, delusion. They're literally, I have clients that come in and they'll be like, I was on Instagram for 2 hours last night. So-and-so's getting married. I'm XYZ age and I still haven't gotten anybody. This. And it's this constant comparison to money, finances, job opportunities, spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend. And I've seen a lot of people go down that rabbit hole on every level of their life. And the more they get indoctrinated into that, the more they compare, the more they find the problems, the more they feel lack thereof.
You're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more. And it's exactly what I'm talking about. This is the problem with it. So, we live in a social media world. We can't deny that. We can't get away from it. Everything around it. I mean, some of us, like me, are old enough to remember the web before Web 2.0, which is what social media was called in those days before it existed. We were looking for Web 2.0, and now everything is by comparison. But just because everything is by comparison doesn't mean you have to compare yourself. And that's the distinction, the self-discipline, the discernment to recognize that you are not comparable to anybody else. And if you don't believe me, take a look at the people you know who are in a relationship who are deliciously happy with somebody you think they would never be with. Well, what is it? Is it that person looks like Brad Pitt? No, they don't look like Brad Pitt. Do they look like Angelina Jolie? No. So what is it? It's because that person's not looking for that. They're looking for what that unique ingredient or set of ingredients is in that individual. When you grasp that, you begin to see how powerful you are. And your purpose is part of that. Embracing your own purpose is so unique. See, my purpose could sound very similar to yours, but the subjectivity of the application of it is so vastly different that it transforms absolutely everything. So when I work with companies around finding their purpose, they'll sometimes go, well, isn't that kind of a little bit like this person's purpose or this company's purpose? And I go, yeah, but now let's look at how you're doing it. What's the context? Vastly different. So it's like embracing that unique, not special. Who gives a crap about special? Special's nonsense. Unique, because there's only one of you in the world. No one else can replace you.
I agree with what you were saying, especially when you said that you were at an event or whatever and somebody was on stage and basically copying everything that you said. It's an interesting spot to be in, and I've been there too, but it not maybe at that same level, especially on stage, but when you have somebody literally putting out stuff, and I've had some people actually contact me about some footage or some video stuff that I put out, and they've said this person completely copied you verbatim. But you're right. At first, you're kind of like, but then eventually you realize I'm the only one that can really explain that in my own way anyway. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, the competition quotient is a very interesting dynamic. Let me ask you, what are some of the things that you would prescribe to somebody? They're at that tipping point. They realize that the comparison, they've realized that the competition isn't getting them anywhere. They've realized they've stepped back and they notice that. But what's the next step that you take to pretty much, discontinue that way of life and to really go internally to focus on what makes me unique and finding that individual power?
And you just gave the hint to it right there, which is really great, which is going within. So this is really important, and it's where most people will fail in the process. They won't go within; they'll go out. And when you go out, you go without. So you will not get what it is that you need until you go in. So let's just take a look at finding your purpose for a moment. As I said, one of the mistakes people make is they go looking for their purpose in their passion. Your purpose doesn't exist in your passion. Your passion is transitory. Your purpose is not. It's evolving. So people go looking for their purpose in their joy. Your purpose doesn't exist in your joy. Your purpose exists in your pain. Until you're willing to go within and look at the pain that you came through, or maybe are still to some degree experiencing, you won't find your true purpose. So your unique embracing of yourself is the willingness to embrace what we call the heroic journey. Joseph Campbell talked about, if you want to find the greatest treasure you're looking for, you must look into the dark cave you fear to enter. The clients that I work with are extraordinarily successful, very often top-level entrepreneurs, C-suite individuals, athletes, entertainers, etc. They've got plenty of money, but there's something missing. And when they come to work with me, part of, I have an application process. I don't take on everybody. I can't. But the people who go through it is like, I have to find out Do you have the courage to turn and face into the dark cave, knowing that I'll be there to support you? So what is it that in answer to your question, what I would ask the person is, what is it you fear facing into? What is it that you're not willing to openly speak about? What is it that you would hide away from? Because there's a good chance that that's where your purpose is buried. And when you get to that, there is no comparison in the world. No one will ever be able to compare with you.
That's true. Our individual pain, the things that we've had to overcome, everybody has that unique individual situation. And I do find that is very revealing. And you're right. It's interesting. I've had several people on the show, throughout the years, and you have some people that are willing to go there. And then you have some people that you catch where they don't go there. They're too scared to. And so they kind of just hit the surface. And you know that they're holding something back. And it's not until they're willing to really step up to that plate and, reveal that to themselves first. It's almost like a personal lie. It's almost like I'm hiding myself. I'm masking myself. I have the sunglasses on in my life, and I'm not willing to get real.
You're absolutely right. And it's that it does take courage. I mean, let me just be clear. It takes courage. You've got to be willing to go to a place that you've not been to before. And that does mean looking into those dark places. It does mean revealing those parts of yourself. Here's the thing. We talked about social media a few minutes ago, but we live in a social media world. We know now in business you have to have transparency. Everybody's talking about that, but not too many people actually understand what that means. True transparency means I'm willing to reveal anything you ask, but I'm not willing to tell you anything that comes to my mind. That's discernment. One is emotional vomit, which means I'm just going to say whatever comes to my mind. The other one is I'm not going to hold anything back if you ask me. So being willing to step into that place that is like, ooh, I don't know if I can say this, but with such certainty, instead of holding back, but just with such certainty of saying, you know what, I don't know if I can say this, but I'm going to say it because you asked. I will tell you. And it gives my life or my philosophy or my purpose context. That's what matters. So we tend to judge ourselves on our history. And so when we judge ourselves on our history, we want to hold something back. But what we don't understand is that history is the chisel that is carved into the marble that has revealed the magnificent sculpture that is you.
That's powerful. That's powerful. That's powerful stuff. So do you find yourself working with CEOs and what have you and really having to get with them on that pain and really having to hone in on that? Or do you find that most people at that level have already done it? Or what's your discovery in respect with that?
Yeah. The people who work with me generally, it's not always the case, but generally have done a good amount of work. And they'll say, I went to Tony Robbins and I did these programs and I went to this and I did that program and I worked with a coach and I worked with a therapist, and how come this is still bothering the hell out of me? Or how come I still don't feel fulfilled? I've got a Mercedes, I got a Rolls Royce, I bought a house here, I've got a house there. How come I'm still... Those are the people who come to me. When they're done with everybody else, they come to me. Now, occasionally I get somebody who's not done that work. I actually just signed a client this week who's not done any of that work, is enormously successful, but is also in enough pain to go, okay, this can't continue. I can see that I will destroy my relationships if I'm not careful. The relationships that really matter to me. So invariably, we have to, there's two places of pain, which is the pain of change. Oh my God, this is going to be painful. I have to change and look at stuff. And the other side is the pain of, I can't stay this way anymore. When that pain becomes bigger than the other pain, so the pain of changing becomes becomes smaller than the pain of staying the same, that's when people move.
I see that every day. It seems like when you work with a new client, from a therapist perspective, and you have people that they're having so much pain and they're ready to make that change, and then you have some people that come in and you're never going to see them again because they're not in enough pain and they're too scared. That change, it's not painful enough to make that change, to get out of that unhealthy comfort zone.
Yeah, and the other thing about that to understand for everybody to get is that, listen, nobody wants to admit they're in pain. So let's just get that said right off the bat. So nobody's putting their hand up going, yeah, I'm in a ton of pain. That's, we've got to understand that. And particularly if we are a public figure or we have a public face, we don't really want to be putting our hand up in public to say that. That's why those people work with me. They usually come to me through others who've been through the process, and they just go, oh, yeah, you know what? You need to talk to Dov. So this is not about whining and complaining. The people I'm talking about are extremely strong and powerful individuals, but they often get to a place where they go, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know where to go next with this. And that is the courage to step forward, because I work with them on a 1-year contract that starts out with a very intense process where we work together in a room together very intensely and privately. And of course, everything is kept in complete confidence. So there's not just got to be the pain, but also the courage to step into it and deal with it. Because if you don't, we all know the example. We can all look at the Anthony Bourdains of life, who are incredibly successful, extremely powerful and influential, who are miserable, who are unhappy. And by the way, if you want to look at the most successful people in the world, I'll tell you something they have in common. Pain. Every single one of them that I've ever met, I've had my podcast for 10 years. I've interviewed some of the most powerful people you could possibly think of, and every single one of them at some point was driven by pain. That's what transformed them.
Do you find, when you're working with these clients, do you feel like sometimes it takes a lot to get real? Do you feel like they've been in an environment where they've had to put on those masks, or they've had to kind of suck it in for a while, and it takes a little bit of time to pull those pieces back and be able to have a real conversation about how somebody feels?
I don't find that happens slow at all with me. It happens very fast with me. But having said that, I know that it is extraordinarily rare. So the answer is yes and no. No with me, but yes, it is extremely difficult because nobody's ever sort of facilitated them having those kinds of conversations. So it's very hard for them to know, am I really safe to have this conversation here? See, part of my work is to hold that person. And, I often will say to my people, I am going to hold you the way a mother holds a baby. And they go, well, that's kind of weird. I'm an adult. And I go, no, I'm not talking about physically. I'm talking about figuratively. You will have to feel completely knowing that I could drop you on your head and be certain that I won't. That I am going to hold you in such safety and such security, and I'm going to stand up and fight for you. And very often those people are people who nobody's ever fought for. They've become enormously successful because they've always fought for themselves. But we all get to the point where we realize, you know what? I need somebody in my corner, and not some sycophantic individual who's just going to say yes because, and say that they're in my corner because they're on the payroll, but somebody who actually deeply understands. Like, as you listen to this right now, ask yourself this question. How many people do you know who really get you? Really. I'm not talking about kind of get you. Most of the people you will meet who are married will tell you, if you gave them truth serum, that their own partners don't really get them. that their own children don't get them, that their parents and their siblings don't really get them. If they're fortunate, they probably have one, maybe two friends who really get them. But guess what? The reason they get them is because they're probably going through the same thing as you are. So they get you. But to be gotten and to be able to be guided, that's what I do.
I can see what you're saying about being able to be understood and being able to be understood in a deep way. I do feel that some people guard themselves quite a bit, as far as in corporate and any time for that matter. But I agree with you, but I think it's also about putting yourself out there. If I guard myself and I protect my information like I'm the FBI or whatever, and I don't really put myself out there and explain and talk about what matters to me or what makes me tick, or putting some of the stuff out there that's not so glitzy, not so glammy, putting some of the stuff out there that, hey, it might be looked at one way or another. But I think the more somebody knows about you, the more facets somebody knows about you, I think it becomes almost transparent. However, a lot of people are living their life where they have so much on their plate, they're so stressed out, they have so many personal problems of their own, that getting to know somebody else is just not even in the cards.
And that's very well said. You're absolutely right. So this is why in one of my last books called Fiercely Loyal, we talked about that if you really want to build a fiercely loyal culture, then you have to embrace vulnerability. And the vulnerability, if you're my age, you were conditioned with the idea that vulnerability was weakness. What we know is that vulnerability is strength and it is power, and it will bond people to you. So, I also train people to be speakers. We have the Authentic Speaker Academy for Leadership. And we start the whole process by vulnerability and asking, what is it you're hiding? What is it that you're afraid they will judge you for? Because that is actually the thing that will bond them to you. So we have to step into levels of vulnerability. If you want to lead and want to be a powerful leader, then you've got to embrace that vulnerability. What is it you're scared of? What is it you feel that they will reject you for? Because you're probably wrong. They'll probably love you deeply for it. Because we live in a world now, because of social media, where the hierarchy is dissolving. And as the hierarchy dissolves, people want to have a human connection with those who lead them. So be willing to step up, be willing to reveal yourself. And again, with discernment, we're not talking about emotional vomit, but with discernment, let people see who you are. I love the images of Oprah without makeup. That was, a really great step for people to understand there is a personification, there is an image, and then there's me. There's the part of me that is, as my wife often says, she'll look at me and she'll see me working with a team or with clients, and she'll say, my God, because she works side by side. She's my business partner. She said, my God, you are so patient. And we might be leaving that situation and driving down the road, and she'll say, my God, you're so impatient. Because that's the truth of all of us, that we have dichotomy within us. In certain situations, I'm the most patient man in the world. In other situations, I'm the most impatient. I'm the most kind, caring, loving, compassionate, except when I'm an asshole. Do I try to be an asshole? Of course not. Am I looking to always upgrade that feature? Yes. But I'm also human. And this is the thing, is that the social media demands vulnerability, but it also shows this perfection. And so this is the pull within us. We think people's lives exist on Facebook. It doesn't. You don't put on Facebook, I put out lots of things on Facebook all the time, and on LinkedIn and on social media generally. But you don't put on there that, a lot of the time that, you want to throw your kids out of the window. But anybody who's ever been a parent has moments where they want to throw their kids out of the window. So, it's like we've got to get more real and understand that there is ups and downs in everybody's life, and nobody's life exists in the perfection or in the bottom, but both are true.
That's so true. And it's about being real with it. It was interesting. It's interesting that you brought that up. When you have, I've had people push your buttons, right? And it's funny how some people will push your buttons because, both of us are leaders, both of us are speakers, both of us are coaches. We're doing that stuff. And then from a therapist perspective, it's interesting when people want to push it. And normally I'm good. And then occasionally you're going to push me. You're going to push me, and you're doing this on purpose. And I remember I had one person do it a couple years ago, and they were like, "But you're supposed to be this," and I said, "I am human," and I said, "But you've made it a game. This is like a game at the fair." You know what I'm saying? Like, you're pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to see when I'm going to break, but then when I finally do, as a human being, come back and say, "Hey, I'm done playing your game," then you're frustrated. And it's very interesting because we're all human, I agree. It's the way we deal with it. Am I going to yell and scream? No. But am I going to say I'm done playing your game? Yeah. Because eventually we all got to be honest about, hey, I see through this game plan. I see through it. I see through the manipulation. I mean, there's only so far that you can manipulate me without me calling you out, because if I didn't call out the situation, I wouldn't be as educated and on top of things as I am. And I think you find that as well.
Yeah, I think you're so right, is that, again, I don't think people trust the persona, and so they want to push up against it. But, as you know from our previous conversation, I traveled the world to study with different religious philosophy masters, so Buddhism, the Tao, Vedanta, which is Hindu philosophy, Kabbalah, and Gnostic Christianity. And I was immersive in those, and I spent some time with Buddhist monks, and my teacher was actually a Buddhist monk who'd lived in Asia for 40 years, but he was actually born in the same city that I was born in. So he was obviously a white Englishman who had moved out there, but was deeply ingrained and very wise, and many, it was a master to many of the other monks. And we were hanging out together, and I like I said, I lived I immersed myself in the studies. And we're sitting in this particular temple, and we're meditating and Om, and doing the chants and all the rest of it. And I don't know if people know this, but in a Buddhist temple, there's a point in a prayer where you can get up and you would light a candle, much like you would in a Catholic church. And he was sitting next to me on his little mat there, and I'm doing the same. So obviously I can feel when he got up and sort of one eye open, sort of watching what he's doing as he walks over to light the candle. And he lights the candle, and he's wearing his Buddhist robe, and he lights the candle, and I'm just sort of watching him out of one eye, and then I hear shit because his sleeve set on fire. And then he put it out, and he came and sat down, and he continued meditating, and then afterwards we left and we walked together, and this was kind of how he would teach me. We would walk together and he would teach me. And we were walking together, and finally I just couldn't hold it in anymore. I said, "You got to tell me what happened." And he goes, "With what?" And I said, "You're so calm, you're so centered, you're so focused, you're so sort of unshakable. And then, you set your sleeve on fire and you started cursing." I just I don't get it. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, I forgot for a moment." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "You're a Western Buddhist." And I said, "What is a Western Buddhist?" He goes, "You think that detachment is without reaction." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Well, Westerners tend to think that being detached means that you don't have any feelings about things." He goes, "When you understand Buddhism and the truth of it, it is that you feel everything with intensity so that it doesn't linger with you. You don't. So detachment is not carrying it with you, but feeling it fully." And we've become a bunch of Western Buddhists in our world where we think we have to be perfect and we can't show any real feelings. That's not the truth of who we are as humans. And what he allowed me to really understand was that he could have that response to it. He could be upset about it for about 3 seconds. And he said to me, he said, "You know the difference between you and I?" And I said, "What?" He goes, "You're still carrying the incident. I had forgotten all about it." That's the distinction.
That's interesting. I feel that way. It's when I go through things and somebody will ask me something about what happened or whatever, and they'll ask me how I feel about it, and I'll forget about it. I have not. I haven't taken it with me, and I don't think about that kind of stuff. And there was a time in my life years ago, I would say about 12 years ago, where I was practicing the other way, where I wasn't going to show any sort of emotions or feeling. I was trying to detach. It just didn't work. And it's interesting when you really get into it and you really feel it. You're right. It's like within seconds after you've forgotten. And you'll have people asking you or something, and it's almost like you're like, "What are you talking about?" Everybody thinks that you had a brain fart. You okay? You got dementia? You something wrong with you? And you're like, "No, I don't have dementia." I mean, well, what do you mean? And then they'll remind you, "Oh yeah," but you're right. It's about feeling and being in that moment because many of us aren't in the moment. The fact is that we're actually on the sidelines and whatever we're doing is almost like watching a football game, sitting in the bleachers, watching somebody play football. That's what most people are doing day in and day out. Honestly, and it's not until you begin to feel your life. And part of that is being in the moment and getting off that cell phone. Part of that is getting out of our mental hang-ups. Part of that is getting out of that negative, broken record and realizing I'm walking down the street or I'm in the middle of this meeting having this conversation or I'm holding this baby or I'm running a race. But it's like most people are thinking about what happened yesterday or the hang-ups or the problems. And it's not until they get home and they're looking at their iPhone or the pictures that they have of whatever that was that they never get printed anymore. And, and they go, "Oh, yeah, that was a great race." And it's like, or that was a great vacation, but you weren't on the vacation during it. You were finding all the problems with the vacation. How the room wasn't what it should be or how the location wasn't right. And then you get home and you go, "God, I wish I was back on vacation."
You're absolutely right. We are observing our experiences in retrospect rather than being in our experiences in present tense.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of us are doing that, but fortunately, it's easily changed. Fortunately, there's an easy solution, but we got to be willing to do it. And I don't know about you, but I think it's funny when I'm driving down the road and people literally have their head in their phone and they're crossing the street. It's just like, man, I mean, it's like, I get you. I mean, but I'm not going to put my faith in those drivers like that. You know what I'm saying? I'm just not going to do it. I mean, you talked about putting faith in you. I get that. But putting faith in a driver, doing 50 miles an hour and I'm crossing when it's a non-cross zone and I got my head in the phone. I mean, that's oblivious. But most of us are somewhere not nearly there, but we don't realize that we're just observers in our own life. And then I think that's where we get all that regret later on down the road when you start feeling regretful of the things that you didn't experience or being in the experience but really not experiencing it when you were there.
You're so right. And in so many ways, we're not even, like I said, we're not even observing our own lives. We're only observing our lives in retrospect. We're just looking back rather than actually being present with. And it's a vastly different experience. I mean, how often, as you listen to this, just think about how, as you're listening, what else are you doing? Why aren't you giving it your attention? I understand that podcasts and radio shows, they all go on in the background. But how much do you miss? How much are you missing? In my last book, Fiercely Loyal, my last physical book on leadership that I wrote, Fiercely Loyal, in there, I described this story of four people you're sitting in a restaurant, you look over the table close by, and you can see four people in a booth, and they're all sitting there as their dinner arrives, and they've all got their heads down, and you think maybe they're praying because their heads are all down, and then you realize, no, they're all on their phones, that nobody's actually present. And the interesting thing about it is they're on their phones, probably with somebody who is not in the room, not at dinner with them, and they're probably complaining that the other people in the room, the other people who are sitting at the table with them, are not present. They're accusing people of doing exactly what it is they're not doing. And they're telling them that they'd rather be with the other person, but when they get with the other person, what do? They whip out their phone and not be present. Am I guilty of it? Absolutely. Have I done it? Absolutely. Am I disciplined about catching myself? Yes. But that's the world we live in. It takes us our commitment to saying, that's not good enough. This person deserves my attention. Like, think about how you feel when somebody in the middle of a conversation with you whips out their phone or checks that light, that flash, whatever it was. How do you feel? Do you feel important? I doubt it. Well, guess what? Neither does anybody else. Being present is the greatest gift you can ever give anybody. The reason people, there are a lot of people who go to therapists who are terrible. Terrible therapists. Awful. Really bad. Don't know what the hell they're doing. But the reason the person goes and keeps going is because somebody's actually listening to them. That's how desperate we are. There are some great therapists out there, but there's some terrible ones. But what makes them good is just the fact that people are so desperate to be heard that somebody would actually be paying attention and not be clicking their phone or doing something else.
I agree with you. In any industry, there's good and bad, and somewhere in the middle.
Of course.
But yeah, I agree with you, and it's interesting. You're right, and I always find it interesting. It's that it's kind of like, what do you call it? When somebody gets on their phone, then the next person, and the next person, and the next person, it's contagious. And it's like, well, I want to be loved too. I want somebody to think about me too. And you see somebody get on the phone, and you see the whole table get on the phone. And It's like they're like clicking away, looking for that text message, looking for that message, looking for that call, looking for that Facebook notification, that update. Maybe somebody cares or gave me a like. I'm so glad that our world is not about likes. What if money was likes? And then we had how many millions of likes in the bank, or some people had only 100,000 likes, and then you do something crazy and you get docked, and everybody's allowed to take likes away from you. I've thought about that kind of stuff, but we're going that way. We're going that way.
Of course we are. China's already implemented it.
Really?
Yeah, China has a system already run by the government that is a social system like Facebook, where people can mark you and comment on how you are, and if you don't score enough or you lose points, you get restricted in travel, bus tickets, things are more expensive. They've completely imported and put in that system. You can find, I don't know if you've ever seen this show called Black Mirror, fantastic show. Go look up Black Mirror and look up the social media episode. Black Mirror is a series, but each show stands alone. They're not connected. And there's one on social media, living in the very near future. And that system is the system in China today. It's fascinating about how your social status rises and falls on how many likes. We have got to change that. We've got to recognize that there's something far more valuable. Human beings need to connect. The root of addiction, if anybody's listening, the root of addiction is not what you think it is. We were educated completely incorrectly about it. The root of addiction is a lack of community. If you don't have community, you are likely to move into an addicted behavior. And in a social media world, we have an online community, but that's not a real community. It doesn't give us the same neurochemistry. And when that happens, we end up lonely. And loneliness is the new smoking. People are dying of loneliness every single day.
It's so true. It's all about that. And it's interesting that stuff in China scares me. It kind of scares me because, for the most part, yeah, you get good likes, you get good marks, but, somebody doesn't like you, somebody wants to mess with you, but then also, how fake does that become? So you can't speak clearly, you can't speak your truth based on the fact that you might offend someone? Very interesting, very powerful. I don't know about it in a good way, though. I don't really know where that's going, because I think that we're getting even farther away from community, and now we're going to bury our heads back into a phone or a smart device, giving people thumbs up or thumbs down.
Well, instead of community, what we've gone to is tribe, and we're seeing that politically across the world. So we've gone from a global consciousness to a tribal consciousness. And with a tribal consciousness, everything is based on right and wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. You're right, I'm wrong. So it's no longer Americans, it's Republicans and Democrats. It's no longer we as humanity, it's men versus women again. This is crap from the 60s. It's people of color versus people who are white. It's all absolute nonsense. And it's our desire for community that pushes us into the tribes. So we actually have to find a greater part of us, which is purpose. Again, finding the connection between my purpose and your purpose and let that bond us. Because listen, when you strip the skin off everybody, they have no bank accounts and they have no color. They have no religion. We're all the same underneath. But we've got to get past the belief systems. We've got to get past the need to be right. If you want to understand war, whether that's the war between you and your husband, you and your wife, you and your sibling, you and your friend, or between your country and another country, it comes down to one thing only. Who is fighting to be right? And when one of you stops fighting to be right, the war is over. Because you can be right for you, but you can't be right for others.
Powerful. Well, for the people that are listening, where can they find more information on you?
Thank you for asking. I really appreciate it, Ashley. You can find out more about me at fullmontyleadership.com. Full Monty Leadership, Full Monty like the movie, fullmontyleadership.com. There you can find access to my blog. There's over 500 articles on there, to my books, to my podcast, which is the #1 podcast in the world for Fortune 500 listeners, to my YouTube channel. You can find me on LinkedIn, of course, on Instagram and on Twitter and all those social places we were just talking about. But here's the thing I want to say to you while you're listening. You know, Ashley goes to the trouble to find you amazing guests and bring you great value and great information. And this is kind of a one-way system where all that value that she's putting out and finding those, all the time and the energy she does to bring you great guests. On the other side of that, I know because I have a podcast, we need to know we're having that impact and that you appreciate it. So I'm going to challenge you that if you're listening to this as a podcast, that you go rate, review, and subscribe to the show and then share the show with other people. That's important. That lets us know that we're making a difference. On top of that, what I want you to do is I want you to write to Ashley and tell her what you got out of not only this show, but any of her shows, so that she knows that you're engaged and that you're actually using it. But you can also email me. I'm going to give you my personal email. It's Dov, D-O-V, at DOVBARON.com. Dov at dovbarron.com. Write to me. Tell me what you got out of the show. Tell me what you're going to do with it, because information is worth the hole in the donut. Transformation takes place when we have application. Write to us, write to me, write to Ashley. Tell us what you got out of it, what you're going to do it. And if I can help you and you want to get in touch with me, you can use exactly that same email. I'm here to serve you and your organization living from a place of purpose so that you can make the difference that you came here to make, have the impact that you came here to have.
I'm so glad to have you on, and I look forward to having you on in the future if you'll take me up on that.
It would be an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Amazing conversation, and I think there's a lot to really take away from this conversation, you know, whether it's about really finding community and really being connected within your community and having that guidance and support and giving that guidance and support is really, really important. Also about, you know, being vulnerable and being okay with being vulnerable. And vulnerable to me has gotten it's got a bad rep. You know, vulnerability, people see that as, oh, you know, you're lesser than or you're weak. It's like being nice. People see that as weakness, and it's not. It's about putting yourself out there, being honest, being transparent, being authentic. And the more you do it, because I can speak from experience, the more you do it, the more powerful you become in a very positive way. And the more other people understand you and connect with you and feel you, instead of feeling as though it's all BS, okay? Because a lot of times it's a lot of smoke and mirrors is what we're dealing with relationships. You know, last but not least is really figuring out that pain and that purpose. You know, and getting real with yourself and allowing yourself to get real. And I know a lot of times when we were growing up, we were told, you know, boys don't cry and da-da-da-da and do this and do that. But you know what? It's time to allow yourself to be and to harness that pain and to connect with that and to get real with that. It can be very impactful And it can really serve its huge purpose and being very fulfilling into your day-to-day life and in your purpose and in your entire life. And I know that I have gotten real with my pain, the suffering in my life, and for some of you, it might be some health issues that you've had to overcome or some health issues that you're currently dealing with. It could be a lot of mental or emotional stuff that you've had to deal with, trauma. And getting through that and accepting it and moving past it and forgiving the situation and dealing with it is so powerful. I appreciate him being on the show, and I hope that this has impacted you. And in the meantime, remember, when we're living our true life, we're living in a place of honesty. When we're living our true life, we're being the leader even when nobody's watching. Okay? That's powerful. That's doing the right thing even if there's nobody there to see it. And if you do that day in and day out, at minute and minute, second of second, it's not really about other people when you realize that. It's all about you. What we do, we're the first one to see. What we say, we're the first one to hear. Are you looking for a new show to watch on TV? Are you looking for a new show with really great content with celebrities that you love? Well, if you are, look no further. There's a new show on Amazon Prime called The Celebrity Perspective. Go to Amazon and in the search bar, put in The Celebrity Perspective. You'll see an amazing show with awesome content with some of your favorite celebrities talking about real hard-hitting stuff that's really connected with them. They discuss their pain and how they found their purpose. None of it's scripted. It's a powerful show with a twist where they switch seats with me and ask the therapist personal questions about how to make their life even better. It's The Celebrity Perspective on Amazon Prime. Live your true life perspectives with me, your host, Ashley Berges. We'll be back this time. I'll be back this time in 3 shakes.